Morning all, and welcome to the Wood Urban Parks Management under COVID-19 International Forum. So we'll just give it a few minutes while everyone's loading in, and then we'll start broadcasting the webinar, and we'll start with the webinar. Okay, morning everyone. Ke te mana whenua, e mihi ana, ina hau e whā, tēnā koutou. Ko oreki tōku manga, ko waimakarere tōku awa, no ototahi o. Kei Recreation Aotearoa e mahi ana. Ko Karl Nesbitt tōku ingoa. Tēnā koutou. Whatu ngā rongoro, te tangata, toite, te whenua. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everybody to our Wood Urban Parks webinar. Firstly, I'd like to explain to you what I just mentioned with my welcome. And it is a mihi, so it's a formal speech from New Zealand, which is Māori, and the mana whenua is welcoming all the customary authorities and the speakers and attendees to this webinar. The mihi ana is a way of passing our acknowledgement to you. People from all over the world, we're welcoming you coming together. Now there's a little whakatauki, which is a proverb in Māori, and that is what it's saying is, as man disappears from sight, the land remains, and that's really important within our parks business. This is a really high value within Māori, and it's the utmost importance to Papatanuku, which is Mother Earth. So where I'm from, I also explained my lineage, which is where I'm from, which is a place called Christchurch in New Zealand. I also connect to a monga, which is the mountain, which is Mount Oraki, Mount Cook, and the river Waimakarere. And these things are really important to understand from where I'm from. I work for Recreation Aotearoa in New Zealand, which is my mahi. And my name is Karl Nesbitt, and I'm the Parks and Open Space Program Manager. So I'd like to welcome you all today to this webinar. Wood Urban Parks attendees from around the world. It is fantastic to have you along. I'd also like to thank World Parks Academy, Kelly Seaton, for organising this webinar with us. And I'd like to thank you, the speakers who are here today, for your kōrero, for sharing the story around the journeys and how you're managing through COVID-19, and your tohu, the guidance around parks management under COVID-19. It is unprecedented times, managing parks and open spaces, and it has a lot of challenges with a lot of opportunities. And it'll be interesting to understand what is our new norm from COVID-19. Now, like all webinars, we have housekeeping, and that's always the fun part. So the attendees who will be here are on mute, and they will change their webcams and change from mute as they're speaking. And you can yourself change your webcam look so you can see how you'd like to see us today. Lodge your questions in the chat room or the questions section, and we'll pick up either. And you know, the great thing about the chat room, you can talk to friends who are on this webinar as well with you and give us your time. And the webinar is being recorded, and we'll explain a little bit about that as well. The purpose for the webinar being recorded is so that we can share this after, and so that we can create insights from this webinar. There will be an Alliance Chair update. We will also have a World Urban Parks update, and our 7 international speakers today from around the world. We'll also have questions throughout the webinar and at the end of the webinar, depending on how we run for time. And then we'll be a quick wrap up and close. So the next thing I'd like to do is introduce Elisabeth Fournier. She is our chair for World Urban Parks for the Alliance Committee. She is also a landscape architect and urban planner who exercises her passion as a designer, manager, or director for local authorities in countries within France. Today, as a landscape and nature coordinator for Bordeaux Metropole, she leads projects to drive change and share this culture. Vice President of Hortus, French Association of Leaders for Nature in the City, She developed the national professional network for the sector. Elisabeth is an active in the development of the International Network for World Urban Parks, including the organisation of congresses, forums, and the development of the France Certified Professional Park through the Alliance portfolio. She sits on the board of World Urban Parks as well. So Elisabeth will be speaking in a few minutes, but firstly, what I'd like to do is introduce you to all of our speakers. We have Luis Romahn, and he is the president of the founder of Parks Mexico and the National Association of Parks and Recreation in Mexico. We have Mark Bowater from New Zealand. He is the acting general manager of Parks and Sport and Recreation for Auckland Council. He's also the chair and the director of Recreation Aotearoa and sits on World Urban Parks Asia Pacific Committee. Gabino Carballo is a senior technical officer in Parks and Gardens Department from City of Barcelona. Mike Shull is the graduate of the Pennsylvania State University and has an employed by the City of Los Angeles since 1990. He currently serves as the General Manager of the Department of Recreation and Parks, Los Angeles. Maria Dorozhkina, Supervisor Association of Parks in Russia and CIS, and a World Parks Alliance Committee member. Jean-Pierre Gueneau, Engineer of the City of Parks, Director of Kratal Parks and Gardens since 2017, and he's also the President of Hortus since 2017. And lastly, we have Bishop Ngobeli, the President of the Institute of Environment and Recreation Management in South Africa, and a World Urban Parks Board member and Chair from the Emerging Cities. So, Elisabeth, I'd like to let you present, and through this webinar, I'll be just running the screen for Elisabeth.
Hello everyone, thank you dear friends from different urban countries and continents for sharing once again with passion and faith in our future based on nature and parks. If we are together today, it is because we believe in collective action. It is the only way for each of us to make a difference. We all want nature's green infrastructure to grow as fast as the internet and be recognized as vital. We prove every day in our parks and in our studies that nature and the city, biodiversity are essential to our life, real life. We see how much people need to go to the parks. It is nature-based solutions. So how can everyone instinctively understand nature as essential so that we regain our sense of belonging to nature to take care of it? We will see today how World Urban Parks has coordinated key international networks to define the common foundations on which to develop new narratives and build together a shared action plan. We invite you all to participate, to enrich it, to implement it. All of us, we are guides, building a bridge between our society in crisis and a new model of society based on the values of nature and social justice. Today, we are going to listen to guides from several countries, thanks to them. Karl, if you can change the slide, thank you. From the very beginning of the crisis, World Urban Parks coordinated an international parks expert panel. In this panel, you can see World Health Organization, NIPA from United States, Salzburg Global Seminar, UCN, National Park City Foundation, ICLEI. Under the hash Nature Never Closes to share information and resources. And we encourage you all to participate and to be member of this movement. Karl. The concept of our collaboration is a flexible cooperative approach, progressive and enabling, core leadership to enable progress with broad involvement. First, we create the foundation of our collaboration during open roundtables based on natural benefits of public green spaces and nature, with 4 key objectives that we will see further, and create nature never clauses to share all actions and information. Other slide, please. We propose and shared statements to recognize the benefit of nature and urban parks for people, and to encourage local jurisdictions to keep parks, trails, nature and open spaces accessible as long as it is safe to do so. Many national and international organizations have signed this World Urban Park statement. Please change. Many of other actions have been flowed. For example, World Urban Park and ICLEI signed a special agreement with participation in cities with nature. World Urban Park changed its movement Parks Week in early May in a based sharing of information and resources. World Urban Park also organized a series of webinars trying to imagine how to build the city of the future, answering the question, what if? After, WUP organizes 3 open roundtables for the next 6 months to follow the process, the evolution of the situation, the first results or decisions with more than 20 key international organizations. Next, please. The action plan followed by this key international organization is leadership to incorporate nature-based solutions into government responses to the global pandemic. Vision to build the future for cities based on nature, urban parks and nature-based solutions. Sharing knowledge to provide to cities and countries the expert guidance, case studies, tools, programs to implement nature-based solutions, and communication about the importance of nature and urban parks, and to show our collective strength to implement nature-based solutions. Next, please. All together, with you, we will develop new narratives to change the paradigm of our society in crisis, in link with the economic, social, health sectors, and in connection with the emerging cities and countries. Thank you, Karl.
So what's really important with what we've developed is there is a leadership and collaborative vision that's required. So as you would have seen, there's statements that have been created by World Urban Parks, and that is a global initiative to make sure that that's connected. It's also make sure that we're developing common resources that we do throughout the world. We have our individuality, but there was always a connection to each other in some way, and it's making sure that those resources are shared. And it's enabling existing programs that we already have existing to run and to align with each other and have a benefit from each other and be connected to each other. So what we'll see with the next slide is our pathway for 2020 and how we want to work with those partners and creating a better connection through the industry. And we have a world industry within parks and within World Urban Parks also, and even within our partners like ICUN. So the program is to be connected with our conferences, our webinars, and share our resources. So you can see that we have started with Parks Week. There is a Mayors for Nature Never Closes forum. ICUN will have their forum, and then we work for Parks for Planets will be the next one. And then the cities that open the cities open event will be running, and then World Urban Parks Congress. And then we plan for 2021. And there is a lot coming forward for 2021 of connecting the world together. And this is where technology like we're using today and other opportunities of connecting our world together through parks and our experience and our knowledge is important to World Urban Parks and its partners. So just again, these are our speakers. So we'll be starting next. So I'd like to introduce Luis to take over the screen, and he will then present his presentation on what it's like with COVID-19 and managing COVID-19 within Mexico, and what does it look like for the future. So Luis, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Karl. Thank you, Elisabeth, and thank you everyone to being part of this webinar and for the urban parks. First of all, I would like to share with you that our organization is working to promote public space and parks and urban parks since 2016, providing services, educational services and products to all the people who works and promote urban parks among Mexico. Our activity has also impact audiences from or among other countries in Latin America as well. Our mission is to provide these services in order to make a better professional people in our sector, and with this improve the quality of life in our communities is our main goal after all. How's the situation right now in Mexico regarding the virus and the crisis that we are all living together in the world? Well, in Mexico, we are just getting to the top of the curve right now. It's kind of strange to predict in which week is going to happen this, but I hope we get there very soon so we can start to plan our reopen. We have more than 10 weeks lockdown, most of the country, and the society has taken care of all the positive action regarding take care of ourselves in this crisis. Most of our parks, cemeteries, and public spaces right now are closed. We have cultural problems, a lack of culture regarding to respect the public space. So many of our leaders in Mexico, regarding the parks, leaders from public park systems and big parks had the decision to close the parks until further notice. And right now we are planning our reopening strategic, trying to learn from many other organizations like the ones who are in the Europe or States or in other parts of the world, putting together all the best practices and also sharing with other countries and in our own cities also. Some of our problems are right now the cut resources in terms of the public parks and obviously in the whole economy. We have experienced in the last 2 or 3 weeks a very high rate of unemployment, and it's going to be very worse because Mexico had already a decline line in terms of the economy. And as I said, we have this lack of respect culture for what is public and for the public space ourselves. Some of the solution that we are trying to implement here in Mexico is in terms of the parks, of course, try to achieve incomes diversification, trying to be creative in order to avoid the cutting of resources from the government. Invest in education. We are developing an online community platform and trying to develop courses and webinars and many other educational tools in order to promote, at least in these times that we are locked down, and try to trace a line that provide us good practices at the time that we can reopen the parks. And obviously promote the park values among the audiences and try to teach the people how value is the park and how much we are missing the chance to get out and enjoy the park. So when we will be able to reopen, people can take a different perspective from our public space. In terms of our economy, we have this recession before the virus. In contrast, our federal government put a big budget for 2021 in parks. I don't know if it's going to continue in 2022, but right now we have a bigger budget for parks next year. And we are going to have, in the middle of 2021, an intermediate public election. So that's implied that in our culture that many public officials are going to invest more in parks because of course the voting effect. What we expect? Well, we expect much more that we had before the crisis. Of course, create parks value awareness among our citizens, promote the health awarenesses and its relationship with the virus, the death and the lack of public space. There is a case, of course, regarding the kind of people who is dying, the chronic diseases and the lack of public space access. Of course, we would like to increase the budget in the middle term because of these things that I just mentioned, and of course have all the precautions and carefully to the parks, wait for the vaccine, and try to establish a stage plan to reopen our public space. That's all, Karl. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis, and it is very insightful to hear what's happening in Mexico, and I'm sure through today we'll see some similarities through each country. So our next speaker is Mark Bowater from New Zealand. So Mark, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Karl. I'm going to start with a greeting in Te Reo Māori, which is the native language of New Zealand. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki te wāhi nei. Ko Mark Bowater tōku ingoa. Ngā mihi nui, kia koutou. Thank you very much and welcome everybody. I wear several hats today. I am the Director and Chair of Recreation Aotearoa, the peak body for recreation in New Zealand. We have 3,800 members running across 4 key sectors: aquatics, parks, outdoor recreation and community recreation. The focus is all about recreational experiences and the quality of them, and the outcome is pitched around well-being through recreation. My day job, I'm Head of Park Services at Auckland Council. Auckland is the largest city in New Zealand. We have a population of around 1.7 million from our national population of 5 million. It's often been referred to during COVID times that New Zealand has been a team of 5 million as the country has really pitched together. In Auckland, we have a portfolio of 4,000 parks, running from small local parks right through to a network of 28 regional parks, and we have cemeteries, 52 cemeteries and a botanic garden as well. And our vision is very much that we are a world-class park system. I'm also a member of World Urban Parks on several committees, the Asia Pacific Committee and the Healthy Parks, Healthy Cities Committee as well. In terms of our organisation's response to COVID-19 and what the country is doing, we have an alert level system that was introduced in March. There are 4 levels, and we moved up through these levels from 1 to 4 very quickly in the matter of a few days. Level 4 is the highest level, and it is very restrictive, and it basically meant the country was in lockdown mode. And we were in that mode for just over 4 weeks. In terms of what that meant for parks and the services that we provide and our people, our parks were open, but where we had gated entries, they were closed. So everything was open for pedestrian and cycling movement, but all the facilities within, like toilets and playgrounds, were all closed for health outcome reasons. As we've moved down through the levels, we've had everybody working remotely from home with just an essential skeleton crew running. As we've moved down through the levels and we de-escalated into level 3, we started to reopen facilities, we started to reactivate some of our services, and we've been in level 3 for 2 weeks, and we've just come down into alert level 2, which means that most of our network is now reopening. It's very planned, it's very staged, And I've highlighted in red on the screen the services that restart at each level. So we're very much looking forward to restarting our service delivery. Our economy has kicked off again, and that's muchly needed. Some of the issues and opportunities that we've seen over the last 6 weeks or so, we've definitely had to refocus our efforts. So we've had to consolidate our workforce, and our temporary and contingent workforce has had to be paused. We've had a huge financial focus on controlling costs, and we've had to look at a number of scenarios for cost reduction going forward. We've planned a phased restart for services and facilities, and this is run right across our organisation and across much of the country. It's really a focus on safety first, and there's also a financial and economic issue for us in terms of what we can afford to keep running. We also are in a severe drought, which is adding to our complexity of challenge. Worst drought in the Auckland region for over 20 years, so we're in significant water conservation efforts now. We've had a big focus on community sport, and I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. So we're looking at recovery packages basically and repurposing grants. We've had a workforce across our council organisation of over 6,500 people, nearly all working remotely. So we've had massive IT challenges, which our organisation has addressed rapidly, and it's been quite amazing how quickly we have all adapted to working remotely from home. We've also seen a resurgence of online offerings, and this is a massive opportunity for us, and there will be learnings that we'll take from this and we will implement going forward in terms of online service, particularly in webinar format. Communications have also been really key in terms of messaging what we're doing, why we're doing it, what's open, what's closed, what personal hygiene means, and we'll take a lot from what we've learnt around how to communicate very clearly. In terms of the economics of COVID-19, on the one hand, it's been extremely challenging, and it will be for some time. This is a long burden to carry. On the other hand, there are opportunities here. This is very much a tug of war between economic and health outcomes for every country around the world at the moment. Our organisation is facing a $450 million revenue loss. At this stage, we can't borrow money to find our way out of this, so we are in cost control and cost reduction mode. There will be a revised annual plan for our next year. It is being tagged an emergency budget, and we are definitely looking at recovery and support packages for sport. Our central government has a suite of shovel-ready projects. This is a traditional infrastructure-based approach to kickstart an economy and provide employment work schemes. And we are currently in the midst of starting to review operating models. And I think this is the great opportunity for us. It's how we may have to be leaner, we may have to be smarter, and we may have to work in different ways for the foreseeable future. But it's also an opportunity about how we can come out of this stronger and more resilient. So in terms of thinking about the future and what may change, and this will be interesting to come back to in 6 or 12 months' time. COVID-19 has, for me, been a stark reminder of the value of connection to nature and health and well-being through recreation, and our parks have played a key role in that. I think we have a new appreciation for what local means, and local will take on all sorts of new connotations in terms of not only what's around us and how much more we have been able to recreate locally, within walking distance, within cycling distance, but also local in the sense of our economies. What will we source locally? What will we now manufacture locally rather than be reliant on an international trade arrangement? It's been fascinating to watch the difference between roads and streets, where cars have dominated cities, and you go into a lockdown mode, cars stop running around, and our streets basically become open spaces for kids to play in and people to walk in the middle of the road. Many cities around the world have had concerns about food supply and food security. So fortunately in New Zealand, we are such a temperate country that we have an abundance of food. But the focus, I think, will go on going forward, what role parks can also play in helping with food security. And it might be more of an educational thing. We already do quite a bit of it through our Connection to Nature programs, but I think we will do more of it. We've seen garden advice programs through our botanic gardens that have been very popular online, and we have a big Facebook following around that. Similarly, Backyard Wild Child. So we've had our community park rangers running schemes online that have attracted thousands of views. So we've had a good following and we'll leverage off that. Ecological restoration and tree planting programs are another part of the mainstay of community development, and we're about to reactivate some of that, and we're also trying to tap into some of those government shovel-ready projects, as there will be a portion allocated to ecological restoration. We're expecting, with international borders closed for some time and being restricted, that domestic tourism will increase. So we have a wide range of offerings on park in terms of accommodation. It's simple, it's basic, and it is that sort of concept of stay local, enjoy what's around you, and we'll be trying to make the most of that. I think what everyone has seen too is that community and particularly professional sport models are very precarious. And you close down a country and sport is one of the first things to go. Sport is also pivotal for our communities, and there is change that's needed to make a more sustainable model going forward. So at the moment we're in support package and bailout mode, but there will be change and it will come. And I've mentioned cities without cars are totally different. So this is a huge opportunity and it will need some bold planning around it. I've heard stories of cities that are already in this mode and I salute them. The impact of taking cars out of streets and certain parts of the city is probably one of the greenest outcomes that we could work towards. And above all, we've seen nature really thrive. So the tagline that nature never closes could never be more true. It has been a very interesting time and nature is definitely one of the winners here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mark. Very insightful. A little bit biased, obviously, being recreational Aotearoa and from New Zealand. I do have one question that's just popped into the chat room. Is your messaging coming from the city or a government department? How is it working in New Zealand for those that want to know?
So across New Zealand, because we are a small country, we are generally very well joined up. So local government New Zealand has helped lead us through a lot of the planning across our lockdown period. In terms of our sector, we have Recreation Aotearoa, we have a New Zealand Park Agency Manager Group that's helped in this space. So the industry is very involved, very connected. We're all contributing to the solutions, and at a local level, local government determines the key outcomes for each region.
Fantastic.
It is a very connected approach. Fantastic.
Thank you very much for that answer. So our next speaker this morning will be Gabino Carballo from Spain. So Gabby, the screen's yours and your microphone. Your microphone, yep.
It seems I'm muted by you. Am I speaking now? Can you hear me?
Yes, you are. Clear as bell.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Well, good morning to you all. Good evening on this side of the world. Buenas tardes a todo el mundo. Well, I work in Barcelona, but I'm a member of the board in the Spanish Association of Public Parks and Gardens, and it's been quite interesting time to be there because we've been able to be in touch all the time regarding the developments and the issues that have arisen with the COVID-19. So I can report a little bit on what's been going on. We basically we are a network of professionals. We are mostly concerned with management. We have some design professionals as well. We generally represent people working at local level, local authorities. Green spaces are generally managed by local authorities and some regional authorities as well. And our main objectives are to disseminate the value of public green spaces and effective management. And there is a lot of exchange of opinions and information within our association. And our aim in the last few years has been to sort of lead the transition from parks and gardens management into the green infrastructure management. So we've been concerned with the issue of public green spaces and health for a while. It's been one of our main lines of talk and speeches and training courses, trying to derive some information, trying to ascertain whether we can use green spaces as part of a health network. So it's interesting that this came along right now, in the sense that the first thing that almost the first thing that was closed down was parks. So we're now entering a de-escalation phase, which means that some of the restrictions are being lifted. But for almost 2 months, the country came to a halt from the 14th of March. And most things shut down entirely. Only essential public workers were allowed to move more or less freely, go to work and do what they need to do. Health workers and shop assistants, food shops, things like that, which raised the issue of everybody at home, and we were all relying on some of the people that are least paid in our society, which is quite interesting. It was also quite interesting to see that public parks and gardens were closed down really quickly. Not a lot of consultation on that, particularly play areas. Most recreational activities were forbidden entirely, including strolling freely in the city or going anywhere, and taking children with you. The only allowance was dog owners. Spanish cities tend to be quite compact. We live in flats mostly, not in houses. We don't normally have access to gardens, private gardens. And if you have a dog and you couldn't walk the dog, that was an issue for owners. So they got the 15 minutes a day, morning and evening, to walk the pet. There was a massive drop in usage. Mobility trends, Google data showed a massive drops. It was interesting to see how much they were used and how little we were able to use them now. The state of alarm and confinement was declared so suddenly that really it was difficult to know what to do. Everybody was a little bit confused. There was a lot of debate whether actually dog owners should be allowed out. A lot of debate about whether it was too late that these measures were taken, whether they were too early. The statistics were bad. I mean, we quickly went up in the death scale, and we were hot on the feet of Italy. It was fairly dramatic. We almost got to 1,000 deaths a day. It was something really difficult to take on. The political debate was bitter, and the number of issues coming up, included all sorts of things. In that context, it was quite difficult to actually think what to do with green spaces. And then there was the issue of everybody moving home to work. Working from home became a solution with its own sets of difficulties. Most public bodies weren't ready for that. So we had to just improvise to keep going. So people were quite civic. They stayed, put in a fairly strict fashion. Those who are parents were quite vocal about the harsh treatment of children and the very slow reaction of government to the particular needs. The issue of public workers literally going home with nothing to do. We tried to somehow resort to volunteer work. Quite a lot of us sign up for volunteering and doing things like building improvised hospitals, so on and so forth. I wasn't called, other people did. We got assigned little jobs to do. And yeah, we helped in any way we could, but the truth is the infrastructure wasn't there. So suddenly we realized that green spaces were sorely missed by people. People needed them, but we were in a way irrelevant, which is quite a dramatic position to be in. So the economic consequences of the green space sector have been catastrophic and will be losses on all fronts. I mean, plant nurseries, for instance, have lost a substantial part of the production. They have a lot of produce they're not going to sell. The season is gone for them. Lots of contracts haven't been honored. They couldn't be honored. And there has been no green space maintenance to speak of for 2 months. And it's coming back to life slowly and counting its losses. There was a lot of debate about the contracts themselves. I mean, there was a point when local authorities were considering cancelling the contracts because the service couldn't be lent. So in the end, the government actually passed a decree making it somehow illegal to just lay off people and also regulated somehow after agreement with unions and the business sector what to do. And what was to do was to delay the knock-on effect of all these decisions. But we can hide in terms of budget, in terms of difficulties for companies. It's going to be a massive blow. 2 months without activity, any significant economic activity is terrible. So in terms of budget, massive problems looming in many Spanish local and regional authorities because they derive a significant amount of income from visitors, from tourism, from leisure activities. So suddenly leisure is a lot more than just something you do. It's a main business, and we haven't been able to do it, something that wasn't foreseen at all. The prospects are dire for the green sector simply because we are in competition with other sectors. In the short term, at least, some of the cities, my city is probably counting its deficit in hundreds of millions of euros. It's going to be very difficult to actually invest in the next few years to get back to a sound financial position. We're going to have to borrow heavily. And what we think is, in the short term, obviously, people are taking different measures. We, in Barcelona, we're trying to take on some kind of naturalization measures. We're letting things a little bit grow as they are. We're letting things take on a different shape and trying to improvise some kind of natural response to the situation. But we already have complaints from neighbors. Some people are really happy about it. Some people are really pleased with what they've seen when they come out of confinement. Other people are really saying, well, we've got to get on top of this. I want my lawns mowed and I want the parks to be as they were before. We're considering actually leaving them a little bit in the state we just found it and evolve from that. Other local authorities are just going back to what they did before, apply, whatever they needed, do whatever it needs to be done, and we'll see later. But what we're trying to do is to stop considering green space use as recreation, and we need to start considering part of public health policy. And the health system has to be reinforced, and parks and gardens need to become part of this health system. And we also think that in the long term, I don't know when, we have to change the accountancy rules, the way we think about money, and we have to start considering revenue devoted to green space management as investment. It's not just expenditure. If we continue to consider people working on green space as a cost, not an investment, then we are always going to lose out on this. And what we're realizing is that we were the first one to take the blow, and we're going to be to continue to take blows in the near future. So Spanish cities tend to like extensive greenery, and some of our cities are the most densely inhabited in Europe, which makes for a remarkable quality of urban life because everything is very near. It doesn't sound very good, but it's actually quite good. But at the same time, has its own subset of difficulties. There isn't a lot of green space, and when you need the green space, it gets full, jam-packed, and that is actually complicated. In the end, the reaction of people when they came out of confinement was to flood to the parks and gardens, and this reaction shows that green space is essential, vital for urban living. It's okay to have nice, dense cities like we have in Spain, but we still need to look after our green spaces. which have been virtually invaded by visitors. And that's not, I don't know whether that's going to be a good idea in the short term for the spread of the virus. And that's pretty much everything I have to say. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Gabino. We have no questions for you that's come through yet, but I'm sure we'll get some at the end of the presentations today. And it is very insightful that, you know, we've seen 3 different styles of management around COVID-19, and it's really interesting throughout the world. Every government sees it in a different way or manages it in a different way. So thank you very much for your time. Our next speaker on our list today is Mike Shull from USA. So Mike, the screen's yours to prepare and you can have the presentation ready, please.
Okay, well, good morning, afternoon, world. Honored to be here today and speak on behalf of Recreation and Parks here in the city of Los Angeles. My name is Mike Shull. I'm the general manager for the City of LA Recreation and Parks Department. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about, if I can get the screen to settle. A little bit about who we are and what we're responsible for here in the city. I mean, we are a population of approximately 4 million people in the city of LA. Roughly about 10 million overall county of Los Angeles, but city is 4 million. We operate about 16,000 acres of land throughout the city, nearly 500 parks. And 1,500 full-time employees, and that ranges seasonally with our part-time staff. We may have as many as 5,000 to 6,000 part-time staff, depending on the season. And we operate with a budget of approximately $270 million a year. You know, our mission and vision really is about quality of life, and really about making sure that emphasis on equity and ensuring that we have access to all individuals and all residents of the city, regardless of your zip code or where you live, has access to parks and recreation. Our stay-at-home order began on March 19th from our mayor. Initially, we began actually closing down things before that stay-at-home order, but we got to closing all of the parks facilities very, very quickly across the, and we actually never closed our parks completely. You were still and still are allowed to access parks for walking or jogging, but no active recreation use was allowed, no use of basketball courts or tennis courts or anything like that. But we did keep all of our parks open to the public during that time. We did install park monitors around the city that was made up of our staff, basically to keep counts of the number of people throughout the day visiting the parks, just so that we could see if there was, you know, large gatherings happening, and we were able to report that to our park rangers and police department and help, you know, dissolve some of that as it built up. But we did spend and have been spending a lot of resources just kind of monitoring what's happening in the parks. Our emphasis here in LA for the Parks Department has really been, over the last, you know, since this began, has really been on sheltering people experiencing homelessness. We do have a pretty severe problem in Los Angeles with decidedly on with our county public health department, as well as the mayor, to really start to look at that vulnerable population and see how we can bring them indoors. It was a bit, you know, could have been a bit controversial about whether or not we brought folks into a congregate setting, but ultimately it was decided it was the best course of action. So we opened up 24 homeless shelters in recreation centers around the city, and that entire program has been administered by my staff in the Parks Department. We also deployed about 550 camping trailers across 12 sites, 12 recreation and park sites across the city. About half of them have been used for emergency responders. The other half have been used for, again, housing the homeless population. And we opened and are operating 15 free childcare centers around the city for anticipation of spikes and in anticipation of trying to help our medical personnel have childcare options, free childcare options that would allow them to work. It's a little bit unique in LA from maybe most parks agencies, but by our city charter, we are the sheltering and welfare arm for the city. So during any emergency, will be a fire or an earthquake or anything like that that requires sheltering, the Recreation and Parks Department here, that's what we do move into that action. So we have staff that are dedicated to emergency response, which is why we've been so heavily involved in this response. But a little unique with us here in LA, but sheltering is a big part of our operation when we're called upon to do that. Just talking a little bit about the new normal, I mean, we will continue to perform the sheltering operations. I don't envision those operations stopping until probably sometime in September of this year. You know, we've begun to look at ways of placing those individuals in permanent housing as well as or even temporary housing so we can demobilize from those rec centers and return those parks back to their, back to their purpose. We have started a 5-stage park and reopening strategy, and it's actually a 5-stage reopening of everything, but as speaking just to the parks strategies around how we balance, the risk and safety and, budget constraints and resources are going to play a significant role in our ability to open. So even if our county health department allows us to open something, there may be reasons why we don't. We're currently in stage 2 of this reopening strategy. Last weekend, we reopened our public trail systems, and we reopened our golf courses last Saturday. This week, our beaches have begun to open, and with very limited access, meaning that the restrictions are you can't congregate on the sand, you can't sunbathe, you can't do anything other than access the water and stay on the edge of the water in the wet sand. So you could walk or jog there, or you could swim or surf, but very limited access to our beaches. We're currently looking at this tomorrow, beginning to reopen like non-contact type activities, things like tennis, archery, things like that. So very slow and progressive movements in what we reopen. A lot of other things that, as we look to move into stage 3 and, stage 4 even, are the cleaning and personal protective equipment that need of our employees are going to be, really important as we begin to look at how we reopen things around the city. And then I think we're going to move in a direction of really focusing our recreation. I'll just say that recreation here in Los Angeles is a big part of our park system. So we have a lot of recreation staff that do a lot of sports, fitness, and cultural programming around the city. However, that staff we're really looking at towards more childcare and after school care as to try to better align with as the city reopens and businesses start to reopen, that the residents have some place to take their children. So we're looking at really becoming a large childcare type agency. And I just say reimagine, because I think we're taking the time to kind of reimagine who we are and what we're at least going to be over this next year or two. And begin looking at our operational models to see how we can't become more effective and more efficient. Whether it's I think the telecommuting and the teleconferencing has really showed all of us that there's a lot we can do and probably save a great deal of money, and obviously still help the environment with doing those things. Probably less travel and more things like what we're doing today. So just anyway, reimagining, I think, is just something that all of us really need to take some thought into. Let's speak about our budget impacts. I mean, nothing I'm sharing here is nothing that anybody else in the world isn't probably experiencing, but we've taken significant, and I won't, dive too deep into others, but, if you look at, the people eligible to retire, and a large part of our workforce is currently eligible to retire, you got to ask yourself why, those people probably won't take that retirement. And we have a hiring freeze, so we won't be able to backfill those positions. So it's really looking at, how we do our resources going forward. Our current workforce is going to be under a furlough program where, 10% of the days that they work, they'll have to take off without pay. I expect that probably to get worse, not better, but currently right now it's just 10%. But I would say on our budget-wise, a lot of the money that we get through the city, what we would call our general fund, is significant, and that's the $270 million. But there's a large part of our revenue streams that don't come through City Hall, and that's through our special fund revenue. We generate in operations, whether it's through concerts, we operate theaters and concert venues, and we operate, 13 golf courses. We generate around approximately $75 million a year in revenue. Well, we're expecting to see a $50 million loss in that special fund revenue this coming year. So very significant. And it's going to be an extraordinarily challenging year to determine what and how we can do many of the things that the city has become accustomed to us doing. I'll finish with this slide, just talking about future pathways, in the environment. Our mayor had started what we call the Green New Deal on April 29th of 2019, and set us on a course to try to become carbon neutral by 2050. So there's, lots of things that obviously with, as others have talked about, I've certainly noticed, we've all noticed the improvement in the quality of air here in Los Angeles with the lack of vehicles on the road. It's just been amazing. And to see the stars at night that we weren't accustomed to seeing all the time. It's really shed a lot of light on the environment. And I think we as an agency are going to look at technology, more so things that we can help ourselves with with the pandemic going forward, as well as our resources around maintenance, but things like self-cleaning restrooms. And I'll throw a shout out to New Zealand. We've been purchasing restrooms that are self-cleaning restrooms that are made trail counters and things like that around, trying to get more data on the usage of our trail systems to help us with better deployment of maintenance staff. And I think we're going to put a heavy infrastructure on investment into our infrastructure with special fund revenue that we currently have that's not really at risk of losing. So we're going to try to ramp up our capital programs to replace old aging infrastructure, to take the time when things are closed to improve them, so that when they do open, the public will have something newer, brighter, and better to use once we are able to open it. And then just continuing to expand our open space. We have a lot of areas in the city of LA that don't have walkable access to parks. And so it goes to the equity around access to parks. So I don't want to stop looking at that, but I would call it, we're going to try to land bank. And we're not going to stop trying to acquire areas around the city, but land banking, then meaning that I don't think we'll have the money to build the parks or to operate them. But I think it's in our best interest to try to land bank as much property, and based on the markets, it might be a good time to try to do that. And then, of course, our maintenance is going to be much higher frequency for all of us. And it's, in a time where everything's being cut and diminished. And then when you reopen something, the expected level of maintenance is supposed to be higher for hygiene. So it's going to be a fine balance in doing that. And I'll just close, by saying that this, certainly, as others have said already, that this pandemic has certainly heightened the importance of parks and open space. And we can all use this in our respective administrations to promote our organizations. And is probably as bad as it's been and as bad as this will be for all of us, I think it's a time that we can really promote the ideas that are necessary for parks to be part of our daily lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. You know, I suppose the commonality that we can see the skies better and we're seeing nature back into the city is happening throughout the world, and that is a changing environment for us, and I'm sure we'd all love to continue to see nature back into our communities the way it has become. I've just got one quick question that's come through from you, from Todd Reichert, and he's asked, has LA placed any effort to communicate or reduce, eliminate services to their citizens? And if so, what the feedback they've received?
Well, we haven't really, there's going to be a great deal of reductions. Because we haven't truly reopened yet, I don't think that it's become like a heightened narrative from the public, but I believe it will be. And I think what I'm afraid of is that, as we all know, you know, as we move on from this pandemic, and eventually we will, that, you know, I'm afraid the public will expect us to be back up to normal. And I don't think that that's going to be the case, simply because of the budget constraints and resources and lack thereof. So probably more to come on that. It'll be interesting in 6 months when we do this again to talk about that question.
Yeah, and I suppose that's an interesting question to ponder. I mean, for everybody in the next 6 months, what is the new norm? You know, we have community expectation and public expectation, but what will be the new norm of what we can actually deliver, and how have our park spaces changed? So I'm definitely looking forward, as you said, to the next 6 months and referring back to this webinar and then having another one to see the changes. So our next speaker, Maria Dorozhkina from Russia. You may have the floor and present your presentation from Russia's point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Karl. Just a second. Does it work?
Yeah, do you just want to go to, yep, go to presentation screen?
Yeah.
That's the one.
So hello, everyone. I highly appreciate the opportunity to represent Russia and Russian parks during this webinar. The world is suffering difficult times, and every sphere of life is affected by the COVID-19, and parks are not an exception. And I'm going to show you how Russia manages its park territories during the global corona crisis. I represent the Russian Association of Parks, which includes more than 200 park territories all over Russia, from Kaliningrad to South Sakhalin. And our main goal is to exchange experience among association members and provide legal support in managing parks. More information about our activities you can find on our website. I will show it in the end. The report is based on the restrictions in Moscow, since 50% of the total number of cases in Russia are confirmed here. I should emphasize that each governor makes his own decision based on the situation in his region and regulations from the government. That's why restrictions from region to region can differ. There are the main points of the lockdown timeline on the slide. In mid-March, all the events and mass gathering were banned, and people were recommended to work from home. 2 weeks later, the government imposed strict measures and closed all parks, malls, and other public spaces. In May, some parks, expo centers, and malls hosted temporary hospitals to struggle with the pandemic. Today, citizens are required to wear face masks and gloves in shops and transport, and also digital passes are required. The total amount of infected people exceeded 250,000 cases. And according to this indicator, Russia has overtaken all European countries, and statistics say that Russia ranks second place in COVID-19 cases. The main challenges parks have to face during the pandemic Despite the lockdown, the territory must be maintained, and that's why 95% of workers work on site. Nevertheless, it takes effort to arrange workflow process. Yes, the situation is far from usual and park is closed. There are no visitors, but every park should adapt to current conditions. So some green zones host hospitals. They use roofed expo pavilions, which are situated in some parks. For example, in Sokolniki Park or Trade Show and Amusement Park within. So this is the amount of beds they had. Of course, the park should save money and adjust the annual budget. Then a half of the profit must be made by sponsor and event activities, but the park must make concessions to keep leaseholders. So it is the main problem. It is not possible to make a half of the annual budget. So there is, you can see here that the state budget and off budget. The park management has to keep leaseholders, offering discounts, payment delay, and new agreement, and it is necessary to talk to each business personally. All businesses are not allowed to work during the lockdown in parks, and many of them are in terrible financial situation. These are food courts, equipment rents, and so on. So everything what helps the park provide a high level of service. This is beneficial for the park to keep the best partners and to optimize the budget to be ready for the summer season, which hasn't started yet because of the COVID-19 actually. And I'm sure that you will agree with me, park equals health and equals attendance. Nature is always a solution for people in cities, and I'm sure that park territories in Russia will be available very soon. Parks, again, equal health. After the pandemic, people will want to walk in nature. It is also the safest way out of the house, and therefore there will be demand for natural territories and open spaces where it is possible to maintain a social distance. People come to work, to do sports, to have a rest. The park must ensure safety for visitors. So to do disinfection, to organize social distancing, to create a variety of routes, provide signs, face masks when it's necessary. People should feel in safety and privacy. The launch of services such as retail, renting, catering, sports activities, and so on will be step by step, but the ban on holding events will be lifted in last turn. However, visitors will return to the park, which means we should deliver high-level services. We advise our members to search for sponsor activities because cooperation will be mutually beneficial. We also invite public business for small markets, which will be properly organized in compliance with government instructions. And finally, the current situation may boost small park territories in every district of the city. So we believe that now urbanists should think of developing local parks to make nature more and more accessible. Then nature never closes. Thank you for your attention. There are my contacts. Please don't hesitate to write me an email or find me on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. It looks like you've got some challenges there as well, the same that everyone else has, and possibly a few more. Definitely, you can see with your budget constraints that it's going to be a hard road ahead for you. So we'll be looking forward to see what happens in the next 6 months when we revisit this webinar.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think this is a question for you that's just popped through, Maria. How do you stop people using your parks when they're closed? You know, what are you using for your closed parks? Is it police? Is it the army? Is it security? What sort of management practices do you have in place? Your microphone.
Our parks are just closed with a lock, you know, and people don't go there. Of course, some parks are not be able to be closed with the lock because it is open, but still people understand that it is not allowed to go there, and fortunately they follow the rules of social distancing very well.
Fantastic, thank you very much for your answer. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Jean-Pierre Gueneau from France, from Hortus. John, the screen is for you, and if you
Yes, thank you, Karl. Hello, everybody. I'm trying to share my screen. Do you see something?
Not at the moment.
Oh, sorry. Is it okay?
Cool, and presenter mode. Screen slide mode.
Yes, I think it's okay.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So hello, everybody. I would like to thank the WUP for this initiative. It's more than ever important that we are able to discuss major issues. We all know this crisis is the result of several crises and many deregulations that are well known. It's, however, a terrible shock for all that calls us to action. I would like to present here a state of the situation in the cities of France based on the work of Ortis, of which I am the president, and the important investigation carried out by Plantécité and its partners. Oh, so it's the summary, but so who are we? Vision and purpose. So Ortis is an association, an old association, as you can see, composed from more than 650 members, essentially responsible of services concerned by environment and nature in the cities. I am myself a director of parks and gardens of Créteil, a city just near Paris. So Ortis has a strong expertise at the service of public policies in the cities of France. Help with the decision, support for consultation, proposal strength at the strategic plan, efficiency in operational action. We explore all themes related to nature in all its dimensions. Every year, by example, we have an important congress in 2016. We have a common congress with the WUP in the city of Albi. It was a great success. Ortis evolue among a network of partners. We are a player in the sector, acts at the regional, national, and international levels with the WUP particularly, with its partners in the private, public, and associative sectors of horticulture and landscape. So two major challenges for us. Nature in the city as an essential element for health, fight against climate change, living environment, social ties, and economical attractiveness. But for plants as a structuring element of urban planning. The situation with the confinement, how is the restart? So this investigation was conducted by Plantécité. Plantécité is an organism important in France, which makes studies for the cities, which are adherent of Plantécité, and studies on the nature, studies on the ecosystem, etc. So this investigation, with this investigation, we have a panel, a representative panel of cities in France with 829 responses. And we can note an important inflection of activities for the great majority, 90%. The main activity which continue was relative at the cleanliness. A very heterogeneous workforce retention, a weak business activity, a stoppage of field work, and cancellation and postponement of planting. So, in resume, a general and important inflection of activities. After this investigation reveal the definition of priorities of actions, seat priorities, a little reinforcement with the companies, with external companies. So we can therefore note a significant inflection in activities, a gradual recovery. The situations are, however, different according to the levels of outsourcing in relation to the work of the companies. So main problems. But before talking of problems, we can note positive consequences with the confinement for the environment. So decrease in air pollution peaks, biodiversity taking back its right, water quality, example Venice, a restored calm, and the form of rediscovering nature. But difficulties indeed with access restrictions. Parks have been closed. This measure provoked a lot of reactions. A debate remains lively on this subject. We have in France about 90 departments, and we have actually a color code with green departments and the red departments. In the green departments, where the health situation is better, there can be parks can be opened. In the red department, where the situation remains problematic, they will remain closed, but many mayors ask for the opening with rules of use. Paris, by example. But I fear, personally, I fear that many mayors do not understand the importance of our parks in terms of health. The economic sector. Sector generally, the sector is very impacted as in other countries, of course, with a double penalty for horticultural producers and nurserymen. The government, however, proposed important measures to help businesses. Ortiz involves as possible within the sector to exchange views and try to minimize the impacts. The implications for the budget in the cities are not fully known, but there are fears of consequences because COVID leads to a lot of new spending, and the saving could therefore be necessary. So, so in resume, impacts, important impacts, and particularly in production, and consequences, probably consequences in the for city, but not really identified at this time. For the future, of course, we know the model, the development model has to be rethought to review food production systems the fight against climate change has to be continued and reinforced. Solidarity to be found, regain a sense of the common. We cannot do the importance and the development of soft traffic, which constitute opportunities for green infrastructure. And of course, the development of urban agriculture. With the COVID, we have an injunction to act. I am personally worried, but still hope, however, by observing several points. Citizens' aspirations on the one hand, businesses on the other. Many citizens aspire to profound changes in lifestyles. Large companies understand that their development is no longer possible without integrating ecological imperatives. The proof, all activities are stopped. All these changes can redesign new public spaces where the presence of plants is essential. And of course, the importance of agriculture to meet today's challenges. Faced with global challenges, there are many difficulties. All the efforts we can make here will be cancelled if they are not shared by all. This problem is well known with energy. The less you consume, the less energies are expensive on the market, and others consume more consequently. I do not plead for degrowth, but for virtuous growth, fully integrating social and ecological questions. Our fight must be more global by integrating all these dimensions with all the actors concerned. Methodological questions arise. We must share them and act together. Thank you for your attention.
John, Pierre, thank you very much for your insightful presentation. And it is quite true that we need to all act together, that nature and horticulture and the environment is very similar to no matter where we are in the world. It's the same. Listening today, we have all the same issues. And it's really fantastic to hear everyone's presentations because it's going to help us, I think, create a bit more of a national approach, international approach around parks and the purpose for parks. And it's going to give us that strength with our local governments, which is probably the biggest strength that we need. So our last speaker, Bishop, I'll let you have the panel. You know how to use this thing, so I'm sure you'll be quite humorous and keep us on our end of our seats for the end of this presentation.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bishop from South Africa. I work for Johannesburg City Parks and Zoo as a conservation manager. I'm a president of the Institute of Environment and Recreation Management. I also sit as a member of World Urban Parks Board and I chair the Emerging Cities of the World. The organization that I'm representing today is the Institute of Environment and Recreation, IERM, that is based in South Africa. Our mission is to be a leading public sector organization promoting sustainable and integrated environmental parks, recreation, and cemeteries management practice in South Africa. So we represent municipalities that are based in South Africa and also some of the non-profit organizations and some of the industries that affiliate to our institute. Our objective is a networking opportunity where we network with everyone, we share ideas, we lobby government, politicians, industry, and stakeholders in terms of parks and recreation, cemeteries, and also environment on how things should be done, how parks should be designed, built, and be used in South Africa. We taking an active leadership role in the industry. We a leading organization in terms of parks and recreation in South Africa. We influence, facilitate, and promote training and development we do a lot of research work in terms of parks and recreation or open space management so that we can be able to optimize the use of these spaces in South Africa. Also, we maintain and create international alliances. We are a member of World Urban Parks, as I sit in the board of World Urban Parks. So in South Africa, we have got a population of around 59 million people. That was by April 2020. Today, with the COVID-19, we have conducted 386,000 tests. Around 12,732 came up positive. There's almost around 4,745 recoveries. There is, unfortunately, we've lost around about 238 people died in South Africa. There's new cases that are coming out. People are being tested every single day, so the numbers are growing. Most of the affected provinces are Gauteng, which constitutes of Johannesburg, KwaZulu-Natal, which is around Durban, Eastern Cape, and the Western Cape, which is those are the most areas that are being affected. But how does this affect us as parks practitioners? Before I go there, this is the map of South Africa. You can see some of the statistics. Currently, right now, in March, around end March, the President of South Africa, President Ramaphosa, announced a lockdown where we're on level 5, where it was a drastic measures where no one was allowed to move. Only essential service workers were allowed to move from their homes to their work environment. We then moved to level 4, which we are currently now at level 4, where there's extreme precaution. You're not allowed to move out from your house without wearing masks. So we are in level 4. Last night there was an address by the president with the possibilities of moving us to level 3 if the situation improves. But if you've seen the graph that I've shown, it shows that the numbers is growing. There's people that are being tested. So it is a critical period for us. But how does this affect us? All the open spaces except cemeteries in South Africa are closed. People are restricted to use open spaces, either your parks, either your nature trail, your nature reserve, your national park. You're not, or even beaches, you are not allowed to use those particular spaces. They are closed. But now at level 4, you are only allowed to jog or cycle or run, but you're not allowed to do those activities in the public open spaces. So those spaces are closed. So which means people will tend to run and jog along the streets, not going to parks. But as you know, people will tend to take chances and try to go to those areas. In terms of our cemeteries, our funerals are limited to only 50 people. More than 50 people in the cemeteries, there's regulations that you get fined and you have to pay fines if you contravene those regulations. By us closing parks, that has resulted in a lot of things. Most of the parks have been vandalized. Most of the communities, because they are staying at home, they cannot move, they cannot do anything. There's a lot of rubbish or litter that is produced from the houses. So when those bins are not being taken, or they're taken because there's so many people that stays in those areas, then they started to dump in our public open space. Then there's a lot of challenges around that. Illegal use of parks by communities during lockdown, because most of our fences, our parks in community areas like our townships, they don't have fences. So communities tend to go into those parks. Kids tend to run to those parks, and because they are used to play on those swings, they want to enjoy those parks. So those are the biggest challenge that police comes through, military comes through to try to move those people from those. But the moment they move out, then people tend to move in those places again. But there are regulations to say if you are found in those particular areas, then you get fined. So it is a very big challenge. access into most of the parks because they are closed. Most of the open space currently not maintained, so we're not mowing the grass, we're not pruning the trees. That puts a huge challenge in terms of cost for municipalities. There's municipalities that struggles financially to for the upkeep of their parks. So since the beginning of the financial year, they put so much effort in terms of maintaining their parks. And in March, from March now, March, April, now it's May. So those parks hasn't been maintained, or those open spaces haven't been maintained, which means the grass has grown, the trees has grown, so they need to be pruned. So that put a huge financial burden to municipalities to say we cannot maintain these parks, and now we haven't been maintaining them. So what's going to happen to our finances? So it's a very big challenge where municipalities are scratching all over the show to make sure that when we open, they can be able to maintain their parks. Also, the biggest challenge that we're facing, also communities are comparing open spaces in South Africa and those of the world. And the biggest question is that, but why are the parks in the other countries are open? Why are the parks in South Africa are closed? One of the things is you will find that in our parks, we don't have a lot of parks in townships. So people tend to crowd in those areas. That's the reason why those areas are you're not allowed to utilize those spaces, because to make sure that physical distances are being adhered to but if you don't have a lot of parks, then you will have a challenge in terms of physical distance in those areas. Some of the challenges that we're facing in South Africa is parks compete with housing spaces. In terms of parks, they are a backlog of housing in South Africa. So most of the spaces that are available is now earmarked for residential area for a new township development. So we into parks department or parks communities, we struggle a lot to get more spaces in terms of building our parks, making sure that we've got linear parks, we've got all our recreation parks, and it becomes a challenge because you are competing with one of the key elements, which is housing. As you know, South Africa, there's huge backlog of housing. So most of the spaces that are available, they are earmarked for housing. And also most of the spaces are owned by sitting in private hands. So private hands, they will tend to say, you know what, let's build houses for people because there is a need of housing. So most of the spaces that we have are earmarked for housing. Also, the main priority, as I said, the provision of houses, electricity, water, sanitation. Then open space management becomes a lesser priority. It sits at the bottom. Instead, it sits in the top of the priority list in municipality, because people will say, you know, I don't want to see a park, but I want to have a house. I want to have electricity. I want to have water. I want to have sanitation. What is open space gonna do to me? But we're trying to educate people to say open space are good for our human health. So we need to put more spaces in our area, and so that we complete that whole package of having housing, having electricity, sanitation, and also parks and open spaces in our yard. In terms of the South African economy, as everywhere in the world, the economy is down. Some of the industries are still closed even now. Our green industry in South Africa is still closed. We're not maintaining any parks. We're not maintaining any gardens. We're not maintaining any landscape. So it becomes a very biggest burden to government to say as most especially in South Africa with a high unemployment rate, most of people that works in that industry, where do they get money to live? Where do they get money to keep themselves alive? Where do you get that? And most especially when they're staying at home with nothing to eat, nothing to do. So it becomes a burden. But the government of South Africa has put a solidarity response fund, which is plus or minus 2.7 billion, where companies goes and apply for those funds so that they can be able to pay their workers, they can be able to do something with their workers during this time of the pandemic. It is a very, very big challenge for us, but as I say, everywhere in the world, we are facing the same challenges. It just depends on how that particular country deal with those particular challenges. The future, as you know, the legacy of apartheid in South Africa, the inequalities in South Africa, how the town planning was done, those legacies of apartheid are still there. But we need to go back and say, yes, they are there. Let's relook at how those towns were planned and how do we re-engineer the existing infrastructure. There's areas where we've got roads in the middle of the city where you can be able to say, let's close off this road. Let's create a public open space here. Let's create a linear parking. Let's create a route for bicycles, so for cycling. Let's allow public transport in this particular area. So there's a huge need for us to go back in South Africa to say, let's relook at how our cities have been designed, because we cannot change what happens in the past, but we can look at the future of our South Africa. You look at our townships, our informal settlements, they are very congested. You find one yard with 2, 3, 4, 5 shacks. Inside there, they've like 10, 20 people. In those, we need to build more parks in our community, in our informal settlement. If you look at most of the public open space, there you find big open spaces in the affluent areas, but you don't find a lot of spaces in our township. And also the issue of inequalities. Most of the spaces that were designed or developed in those communities, in those informal settlement in the past, where like they would put a roundabout and a swing for kids to go to play. But those parks are not parks that even an adult person can say, no, I need to go and walk there. I need to go and cycle there. But parks that we started developing post 94 still started to have those amenities, to have swings, to have bicycle lanes, to have jogging lanes, so people can be able to recreate more. So we need more spaces in those particular communities because they need them most compared to your affluent area or suburban area where they've had parks pre-94 and also post-94 they had those parks. So we need to relook at how our cities have been designed. How we build our parks in the future, it's there. We have to build parks that will have all this aspect of physical distancing. Parks that if in future there's another pandemic, we can be able to say, now our parks are ready, or our open spaces are ready. We don't need to close them because we've got measures in place that issues of physical distancing can be observed in those particular spaces. So it is a very big challenge that we're facing in South Africa. We need to build more parks, we need to build more nature trails, we need to build more nature reserves so that people can be able to enjoy those particular areas, most especially in our township areas, most especially next to our informal settlement areas. We've got those opportunities. It's time for us to put more effort and think differently. Some people said, this COVID-19 is a challenge, but let's look around challenges. There are positives from those particular challenges. We cannot go sit down and cry, but we can do something about it. That's the same thing that we have done after post-apartheid. We said we cannot sit and look at the legacy of apartheid. We have to look at the future and how we do things in the future. The future of new parks, the future of how we design new spaces depend on us, how we work together, and also learn from other countries, from other municipalities, other institutes that have done so much work in terms of public open space management and maintenance. My pleasure was not that very long. Thank you very much, Noribu.
Thank you, Bishop. It's great to hear your positive outlook towards COVID-19 and that it is an opportunity for you to develop stronger park spaces and create better environments for your community. So I'm just going to switch to my screen and make sure, here we go. There we go. So we've come to the end of our speakers, and it's been fantastic kōrero and listening to the stories from each speaker. So what is our next step and from today? And the webinar will be made available to everyone that's registered to this webinar, and we'll also include the slides. We'll also include the selection of the questions and responses, and we actually haven't had many questions to carry on this conversation, and I am also mindful of everyone's time. We're now an hour and a half into this webinar. So also keep your eyes out on more webinars from Wilderness Park. So I've added the link here, which takes you straight to the Wilderness Park's webinar. Webpage. And one thing that's really important is that those that aren't members of World Urban Parks, please do become. This is how we become more internationally connected and how we're able to share more information to everyone around the world. So lastly from me, it's thank you to all of you who have joined us on this journey today, and the kōrero, the stories, you know, kia kaha, kia kōrero matua. Thank you to the esteemed speakers and for their information that they've passed on today and shared. And each country has its own way of managing COVID-19, and we have all similar concerns and opportunities out there. And the importance of our wellbeing, our parks, and our people is one of the key things around developing our nature and our prosperity and our future of our mental health and our well-being. So my final question to you is, what our park space provides in the future, and what challenges or influences can you make? So the last thing from me, thank you very much. Masi, kia kaha, gracias, and sorry I cannot speak Russian. Thank you all.
Спасибо.
Thank you all. Merci beaucoup. See you in 6 months.
Gracias.
Thank you, everyone. It was really great to meet you.
Thank you very much. Merci. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Gracias.
Thank you all. Kia kaha.
Bye.